Okay guys, today we're going to take a look at the new effects that we got as part of Firmware 1.3.74. We got 9 new effects. There's delays, distortion, envelope filters, and more. It's a really nice assortment. So, let's dig into it.
SuperDrive, inspired by the extremely popular and indispensable Boss SD1. Boss introduced the SD1 Super Overdrive pedal way back in 1981. Since then, the SD1 has remained in continuous production, selling literally millions of units and consistently enjoying status as a top-selling pedal for several decades, not just within Boss sales, but in general overall pedal sales as well. The reasons for its success are pretty simple. It's inexpensive. Brand new ones usually sell for less than $70. It's incredibly sturdy and reliable, and it just sounds good. Controls on the SuperDrive are drive, tone, and level. Let's listen to the SuperDrive with no other effects. This is the test preset that I put together, guys. As you can see, I have all 9 effects. They're all in bypass mode, and I'm using the new Deluxe Reverb Blonde amp. Now, some of you may be saying, how can you use that amp with all of those pedals? Well, I'm using the amp-only version. I'm not using the convolution reverb. So the amp by itself sounds like this. So let's try out the SuperDrive with its default settings. Now let's drop down the drive, bring up the level, and just see. Okay, now let's bring the level back down and bring the drive way up. Let's just see what this thing can do. Rocket Man, overdrive effect inspired by Rocket's The Dude pedal, known for its warmth and Dumble-esque mid-range. The J-Rocket Audio Design's The Dude delivers the sound and feel of the legendary Dumble-style overdrive special amps, all in a compact guitar pedal. Inspired by the tones of Robin Ford to Larry Carlton, The Dude captures the essence of these iconic sounds, from clean, transparent boost to scorching high gain. Controls on the Rocket Man are drive, level, treble, and deep. Let's listen to the Rocket Man with no other effects. Okay, now right now the Rocket Man is in bypass mode. This is my guitar volume. Watch how loud this thing gets even at that low level. Again, let's bring level up just a smidge. Drop drive down. Try bringing it down even a little bit more. Now let's bring that level back down and crank that drive up and see what this does now. Big Apple Fuzz. Inspired by the Electro Harmonix Big Muff Fuzz version 9, also known as the New York City version. Originally manufactured in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Big Muff Pi stomp box pedal by Electro Harmonix featured circuit builds that stress sustain while minimizing the shrill tones typically produced when adding distortion to high-end harmonics. From the beginning, the early Big Muff Pi design produced a smoother, characteristically stable sound. This velvety tone contrasted easily with the harsh tones notable in many of the fuzz builds available at the time. After closing for a bit in the early 1980s, Electro Harmonix would continue to manufacture various versions / reissues of the original Big Muff Pi design. Controls on the Big Apple Fuzz are sustain, level, tone, blend, and mids. Let's listen to the Big Apple Fuzz with no other effects. Here's the Big Apple at default settings. I'm not going to play around with this pedal because we'll just be taking too much time if I do. But there's a lot you can do. Well, let's just see for one thing. Let's bring that to sustain down and level up. So even with that sustain down, it is just fuzz city. If we bring it back up and bring that level down. Now, I could let that go and it would just keep building and building and building upon itself. Little Rock Phaser. Phase shifter inspired by the Electro Harmonix Small Stone, a simple phaser pedal that became a mainstay on classic records from the late 1970s onward. Back in the 70s, the phaser to rule them all was the MXR Phase 90, due to its use by Eddie Van Halen. However, the popularity of that pedal encouraged companies such as Boss and Electro Harmonix to create their own versions. Using the single knob model the Phase 90 and 45 laid the ground for, Electro Harmonix added an interesting color switch, allowing players to switch between a much more subtle and a more obvious tonal change, effectively giving the equivalent of two pedals in one. Controls on the Little Rock Phaser are color, rate, and tap division. Let's listen to the Little Rock Phaser with no other effects. Here's the Little Rock Phaser. Now let's hit that color switch and see what that does. Analog delay. Inspired by the quintessential Boss DM2 Bucket Brigade pedal, this analog delay has become highly collectible by players who prize its smooth repeats and warm sound. Vintage analog delay pedals have made a comeback in a big way, and the iconic Boss DM2 leads the pack. The 3-button layout of repeat rate, intensity, and echo have become familiar, but in the early 80s, bringing this much delay to a compact pedal was a major step forward. I mean, back then, you were lucky if you could afford a delay unit that had 256 milliseconds of delay. To achieve a maximum of 300 milliseconds of delay time, Boss engineers had to stretch the capabilities of the BBD chip used in this pedal. One of the ways they achieved this was to limit the frequency response of the effect sound. This compromise contributed to the DM2's warm tone, which could be called lo-fi today. Controls on the analog delay are time, feedback, mix, tap division, and spillover. Let's listen to the analog delay with no other effects. Now, I always put my delays and reverbs after the amp. So here's the analog delay with default settings. Echo Tank. Inspired by the initially overlooked Ibanez Soundtank EM5 Echo Machine pedal, this 90s delay has become a cult classic, acclaimed for its organic, mellow tone. The EM5 is part of the Soundtank, or 5 series in Ibanez line, built from around 1990 until 1999. The Soundtank series was different in that it used a plastic housing instead of metal or aluminum for the pedal enclosures, and they were, of course, shaped like a tank. The EM5 is a digital delay pedal that sounds incredibly warm and very much like the tones of a great-sounding Echoplex or tape delay unit. Its repeats are clear, yet warm. They never get in the way of your playing. Controls on the Echo Tank are time, feedback, mix, tap division, and spillover. Let's listen to the Echo Tank with no other effects. This is the Echo Tank at default settings. Now, just for the heck of it, let's kick up the time. Woo! Well over a second. Impressive. Reverse Nebula Reverb, a Fender original that reverses the Nebula Reverb effect. Fender describes the Nebula Reverb as an immense-sounding reverb effect that adds incredible sonic depth and complexity and creates a haunting and distinctive sound unlike anything in this universe. The reverse Nebula Reverb takes the immense-sounding Nebula Reverb effect and reverses the reverb to create utterly distinctive and otherworldly ethereal sounds. Controls on the reverse Nebula Reverb are mix, size, diffuse, pitch decay, response, mod rate, mod depth, high cut, low cut, and spillover. Let's listen to the reverse Nebula Reverb with no other effects. The reverse Nebula delay at default settings. Filtron. Inspired by Mutron's Microtron 4 effects pedal, this envelope filter is highly celebrated for its funky, percussive, and vocal-like tones. The Microtron 4 is based on the Microtron 3, which itself is based on the classic Mutron 3 envelope filter. If you're looking for that perfect Jerry Shakedown Street sound, then this is your pedal. Thing of it is, though, the Filtron is just as touchy as the Mutron pedal. You have to adjust your guitar's volume and your picking attack, otherwise it just doesn't work right. Single coil bridge pickup seems to be the winner here. Controls on the Filtron are level, peak, gain, mode, direction, and range. Let's listen to the Filtron with no other effects. Now, like I say, the Filtron is touchy, and I'm still not quite getting the Jerry quack, but I'm working on it. Now this one is going to take some work, but I do believe if you have the right effects, like maybe a little distortion afterwards and a little delay, it's going to sound amazing. Enigma Filter, inspired by the filter setting in the Korg A3 rack unit. The Korg A3 is a rack mount multi-effects unit from the early 90s. Its claim to fame is that the Edge used it, and it was prominently featured on U2's hit Mysterious Ways off of their Achtung Baby album. Controls on the Enigma filter are sensitivity, frequency, resonance, attack, and release. Let's listen to the Enigma filter with no other effects. Here's the Enigma filter at default settings. So again, this is one that's going to take a lot of work to get it to work right. Again, you'll have to do some work with that one, but I do believe it will pay off.
Now, of course, these effects work much better when you use them with other effects. For example, I like using the Filtron, followed by the Nashville Overdrive, followed by a little bit of delay. That can get really, really cool. So try out these new effects, come up with some cool combinations of your own, and let us know what they are. And if there's something really, really good, upload it to the cloud so we can try it. Now, if you're still here, thank you so much for stopping by and sticking around. I really do appreciate it. If you've got any questions, comments, or suggestions, drop them here, and I get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Now, next Wednesday, I will have all new content. You don't want to miss that. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. All right, guys, have a fantastic holiday weekend, and I'll be talking with you again next week.